everybody, and welcome back to the Kimmytravels podcast. This is my very first episode with a guest on the road. You'll never believe where I am. So I want to introduce our guest. Her name is Rachel Smith. She's originally from Texas and was living in Houston for the last 15 years prior to relocating with her family to Buenos Aires, Argentina. And that was 2.5 years ago. She is a lawyer who's practicing commercial litigation and employment law for the past 14.5 years, all before the move. So I do have to say that we are live, well, it's recorded, you know how I am, in Buenos Aires. We're in the city center, so you're going to hear all the beautiful sounds and movement of the city, but it's just part of the authentic experience. So let's welcome Rachel. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm so glad you're here, Kimberly.
Yes, and she is hosting me in her fabulous house. It's palatial. When I tell you it's palatial, believe me.
It's also 90 years old.
Yeah, it is gorgeous building with like this old school elevator where you have to like close the wrought iron before you press, the button.
And pray that you don't get stuck.
Oh gosh, is that a thing?
I've been stuck once.
She didn't tell me that.
Because then you wouldn't.
I would have been taking the stairs. Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow. Okay. So I'm Rachel Smith, a lifelong Texan, but for the last 2.5 years, my husband and I, Michael, have been married for 16.5 years. He's an Oklahoman. We have 2 girls, Olivia, and she's 13. We have a new teenager as of like 3 weeks ago. And Claire, who's 9.
Nice. Okay. So I think I invited her on the show, obviously, because she has an amazing story to tell, because it's not often where you get Americans with kids, families, relocating. So she's going to tell us a little bit about that process, her life here for the last 2.5 years, and what she's going to be doing in the future. So tell us a little bit how you came to the decision with your husband to move abroad.
Yeah, so like I said, Michael and I have been married for 16.5 years. He works in finance in the oil and gas industry, or as they say here, petróleo. And we knew very early on in his career that living abroad was a possibility, and living in a number of places was a possibility. And so I don't remember if we quite decided when we were dating, but certainly in our very early years of marriage, we said if we ever had the opportunity to go abroad, we would do it. And about 15 years in, the opportunity presented itself, which, dreaming about a possibility as opposed to it actually being reality are two different things, right? So we were really in the midst of very busy lives when the opportunity came up, and I was in the midst of a career, and we still jumped at it. We did.
Mm-hmm. But was there any hesitation at all? Because, you had the 2 girls, they were in school, you were practicing quite actively, and it's just like, are we putting the hard stop on our lives and really shifting, or should we think about this, or like, what was your thought process like?
We knew we were going to do it.
Okay.
We absolutely.
You said we're going to do it. We have to.
There was no hesitation that we were going to go. In fact, I was working in big law, had worked there since being an intern in law school, and I had been a partner for 7 years, and I really felt like shortly before the opportunity presented itself for Michael that my career was. Even though I've been practicing for almost 15 years, it finally felt like it was kind of taking off a little bit. You know what that means?
So you're just like at the cusp of...
I was at the cusp. I was nowhere close to any sort of peak or anything, but I felt like I was like, I'm rounding a corner. Yeah, I kind of finally know what I'm doing. Yeah, I can kind of see things coming togetger, which is a long time to wait for things to come together, right?
Things happen in their own time.
Well, they do.
It eventually happens, right?
Exactly. Someone said to me, I remember another woman lawyer said, nothing ever happens in your career before 40. And I think she was right?
I mean, when you're 20 and somebody tells you nothing's going to happen to your 40, you're going to be like,
oh my gosh, that's forever.
So,
and I'll tell you, it was on my 40th birthday that I was flying back to Houston from our first visit to Buenos Aires. So I was like, oh my God, everything's happening at once. So to go back to your question about was there any hesitation, we knew we would go, but the hesitation was like, what will our lives look like? Yeah. And do I completely walk away from my career? Do I put it on hold? Is it just like, do I try to continue it in some form? Do I do a sabbatical? And that was the question, that was the hesitation, and that was what I spent a lot of time trying to figure out in the months from between the time that we got word that this opportunity was gonna that this opportunity had come to fruition and us actually leaving.
Okay. So when we talk about the opportunity, because that's what we're calling it, the opportunity. Now, is that something that your husband requested? Like, hey, if there's ever a post outside the U.S., like, put my name on the list? Or were they just like, surprise, do you want to go to Buenos Aires? Like, how did the opportunity happen?
It was a little bit of both. So I think the way it works with his company is they always asked kind of at review time, is this an interest of yours?
Oh, I like
and
that.
For years, he always indicated that it was an interest. But they have operations around the world, and so we had no idea where we might go. And so when we heard Argentina, we were like, great. Now, where's Argentina? I mean, we knew it was South America.
That happens all the time. That happened to me when I got a job offer first to South Korea, and I was like, one moment.
Yeah,
sure, I could go there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really far.
So honestly, I mean, it's embarrassing now, but we knew very little about Central or South America. I mean, we're Texans, so like Mexico was as far as we've gone. I think I'd been to Cabo, and that's it. My understanding of Spanish was limited to Tex-Mex, and very limited. So yeah, we didn't know much about Argentina at all. But just the idea of living abroad was something so intriguing to us. We were not going to pass it by. I mean, they probably could have sent us to Timbuktu. Well, there are a few places that
you were like, maybe we'll wait for the next.
But Kimberly, very few places I think would have been off limits.
Okay,
for me.
Nice.
So.
And what about the girls? Like, how did you break it to them that you were, hey girls, we're gonna move. Say goodbye to your friends.
I know. Say goodbye to your friends. So Michael did. I was actually when we started to kind of hear whispers that this might happen. But when we got word, I was in trial in Kansas City, Missouri for like, I don't know, 3 weeks.
Oh man.
And so he was home with the girls, and he told them first.
Okay.
Yeah, and he started actually introducing them to different things about Buenos Aires.
Yeah, without telling them the reason?
Well, I kind of at the same. He rolled it out.
It's like, hola, familia. And like, Dad, are you speaking Spanish? Why? What's happening?
Yeah, so like our oldest is really into books. Like she has been an avid reader from as long as I can remember. And actually not far from our house, there is a bookstore called El Ateneo. And it's they bill themselves as the world's most beautiful bookstore, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
I like that title.
Like high ceilings. It's like the Sistine Chapel at the top, and that was one of the things that he told her about the place that we were moving, is that you can go to the world's most beautiful bookstore.
Wow,
so,
that's a good selling point.
Yes, it was a good selling point.
So how old were they at the time of the move?
Ooh, let's see. Olivia was. She was 10. Wait, hold on. I think she turned 11. Yes, her 11th birthday was like 2 months after we got here. Okay. And their birthdays are 4 years and 4 days apart. Okay. And so Claire turned. What was that?
Like, how old are my kids?
I know. I think she turned 7. I think she turned 7 right after we got here.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not good at math.
Okay. No. A lawyer that's not good at math? Come on, give me a break. So
Imagine that.
Imagine. So speaking of that, like you mentioned earlier that you were just like on this cusp of taking off with your career. But obviously if you are not even out of the state, but out of the country, right? How are you going to continue with your career? So
that was the question. Huh? So at the time, because I had like I said, a lot of great things were happening in my career. From my perspective, I said, I kind of felt like I was getting a handle on things. And I had been practicing for a while.
Right.
But again, I just felt like I was rounding a corner. And it was, like I said, we found out while I was in the middle of a trial that we were going to be moving. And so I was riding this high. And
did you win the trial?
We did.
Congratulations. Was that your last case?
That was my last case. It was. So, and that's a whole nother podcast, that case right there. So,
okay,
we won't talk about that.
We can do like a, no, okay.
we'll talk about it offline.
It's like part 2, Defense Attorney Chronicles. Because I know y'all have some good stories.
We have some good stories. But, so like I said, I felt like I was kind of riding high and some great things were happening in my career that I had been working toward for a long time. And so I went to my law firm. I had been a partner for 7 years and said, hey, I don't think I want to completely step away. I'd really be interested in continuing in some sort of part-time capacity. But I worked for a large national firm, but did not have an international presence, and there wasn't really the mechanisms in place with taxes and things. It would have been extremely difficult to continue with my law firm outside of the country.
Okay.
So I ended up just leaving the practice.
Oh my. You guys, she left the practice.
No. I'm going to interject this.
Okay,
and
yes.
I will tell you, this is an aside. This has nothing to do with living abroad necessarily. But as a African American woman who was one of very few black people.
Yeah, people, not even women, black people.
Black. Certainly a working mom and a black partner in a 1,000 people law firm. To me it meant a lot to have
that representation,
to have achieved that to that point in my career. That certainly was not the trajectory that I would have thought that I was going to be on, and so I was very grateful for that opportunity, and I'd worked really hard and really enjoyed my job. So to walk away from that was a little, I grieved for a while, honestly, when I left. And for a number of reasons, I felt like I had a grieving period. And there were moments, probably that first year, maybe even year and a half, where it would just kind of sting that I had left my career. I'd see, a former colleague or someone, doing great things, and I'd be like, So there was some of that. It's not all just like going off to live this life of leisure, in another country. So.
Right. I mean, that grieving process, that's something I've never actually had a grieving process over a job.
Like, congratulations.
I throw up the juices like, see y'all later. Hey. But yeah, it's a real thing to consider. Like if you have this dream that you've been dreaming of for years, and then you get the opportunity, but part of that is a sacrifice of something that's very important to you.
It is. And so you were asking earlier, like, did we know we were just gonna go, and was there a decision? There was not a decision. Like, there was no, I remember trying to figure this whole thing out. Would I continue working? Could I continue with the firm? And I remember him asking, like, so what do you want to do? And it was almost like I was like, there's like, I'm leaving. Like, that's not a thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to Argentina. Like,
Right.
staying here is not a thing. If we could
Right.
work it out for continuing, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
But, so, yeah, I was gonna jump.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of me wanted that parachute of, like,
of the
career and job
security,
and all of that
Mm.
with me. And then it just didn't work out. And I look back and I'm like, ooh. Thank God for unanswered prayers. You remember, I think it was Garth Brooks who sang a song. It was like,
sing it for us. Sing a
"Sometimes I
verse.
thank God for unanswered prayer." And it may not even be Garth Brooks, but
Okay, I was like, I'm in Texas, but I'm not going to ask about country music.
And that's not how it goes. The tune is really off. I'm a horrible singer. It may be Randy Travis or something. It is definitely an early 90s country singer. But whatever the case, yeah, I look back and I'm so thankful that I did not hold on.
Okay. If you know what song she's trying to sing, do let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. I love it. So you had it in your mind that you're coming, even if you have to give up your career. Mm-hmm. So now that you get here and you know that you're not going to be working, like to go from a career woman, like for example, how many hours a week were you working?
Too many.
I
don't know. I mean, it was probably 50 to 60 more. I mean,
right.
Our routine, generally speaking, was I would take the girls to school. We'd work a full day. I, every night, opened my laptop up and worked till midnight and sometimes beyond. Mm-hmm. That was the routine.
Okay. So you have this super duper busy family, working mother, career woman, high, partner in the law firm. Mm-hmm. And now you're in Buenos Aires. What are you going to do? Like, what do you do? Did you have an idea of like what you wanted to do while you were here? Like to keep like yourself active and busy?
So for years I have been fascinated with antique letterpress. Mm-hmm. And back in 2017, my husband bought me for Mother's Day a 120-year-old antique letterpress machine.
Wow.
It's like over 1,000 pounds. It's huge. And so I knew that I wanted to bring that here. The problem with it was, so if you know anything about letterpress, it's,
I don't, except for what I've seen this week.
Okay. It is
explain it like we don't know.
Very slow, long, arduous process. You have to set the type with either wood or metal type. And setting type, you put your letters in upside down and backwards, and you have to lock it into place and then set it on the printer and ink your printer. I mean, there is a reason that this is not done anymore, right? Okay.
There's a simpler, easier process.
Easier press print on your computer. But it creates a beautiful work of art, in my opinion. And so I had taken some classes. I actually had a client, the Printing Museum in Houston. You should go check it out. It's a wonderful place to visit. But they were a client of mine for many years, and I took classes there. And I fell in love with this craft, and we found this letterpress machine. The problem was when I was practicing, I never had time to use it because you have to have a lot of time to ink a printer and set type and all that stuff. And so I'd done it a little bit, and so my hope and dream was that when I came to Buenos Aires and I wasn't practicing, that I'd have time to pursue this hobby. But we moved into a building, a 90-year-old building with very small elevators.
Yes, a beautiful elevator that sometimes gets stuck. I didn't know. Okay.
And so they could not get my letterpress machine that weighs 1,000 pounds into the building. Oh, no. And so I found a 500-pound letterpress machine, and and we could get it in the building. And so that's what I've used to do my letterpress on here. And I've also taken up the hobby of quilting.
That's so good. Yeah. So I think this is kind of what happens. I say like when people, I mean, I know retirement's way off for us, but when people retire and they don't have a plan, right? Because you're so used to like working in this rhythm and just like going and never sitting down, that then when you have that moment of like stillness and peace, which we all know very well, thank you to COVID, it's just like, what am I gonna do? So I think it's great that you had already started that hobby and found something that you loved, and you finally had time to kind of like keep doing that.
It has been life-saving. So prior to COVID, I had just started to kind of get geared up, firing up my machine. And then so my mother-in-law my husband's from a very small farm town in Oklahoma. And my mother-in-law is a quilter and a baker, and she does all the things, the gardens, like all the slow farm town things.
Yes, love it.
And so she started, she'd sewn for a long time, but she started quilting when our firstborn when I was pregnant with Olivia.
Nice.
And so I was always fascinated by this hobby, but again, I did not have time. And so I started shopping for a sewing machine in February of 2020. Can you believe that?
That's perfect timing.
I know.
You were like just ahead of the COVID curve.
Just ahead of the COVID curve. So I literally started sewing it took me a while to learn to thread my machine.
Okay.
But
I hear that's tricky. I'm not a sewer.
It is so tricky. But I started sewing in the beginning of 2020. And so those have been my two big Buenos Aires and pandemic hobbies.
I love it. So your COVID pivot was actually something that you loved before, and then that's something you just started before that. Okay, so you had like your time was like, okay, you had things to do. I love it. I love it. Hey, you guys, if you have hobbies and you're working 60-hour work week, ask your husband to get relocated to Buenos Aires. That is that's what we've learned today. That's what we've learned today.
But you know what? You bring up a good point, Kimberly, because one of the things that I often think about is we're, as much as we love Argentina, we won't be here forever. And I really want to, some of these lifestyle practices that we've incorporated, that I've incorporated personally and then as a family, I don't want to lose that just because we go back into the hustle and bustle of the U.S. And so I really want to be able to continue this slow pace. And I don't know why I'm so attracted to like hobbies from yesteryear that require you to move very slow.
Yeah, because it's, you're slowing down.
Yes, I love tips. And then she actually taught me to sew over Zoom during the pandemic.
No way.
Yes. So between my mother-in-law on Zoom and YouTube and just kind of figuring it out, and I have a long way to go.
You guys, her stuff is so beautiful.
Absolutely
it's really beautiful. And when she told me she just started before the pandemic, and I was like, but why is your stuff so pretty? Because when I first started something, it's gonna get like jagged edges and it's gorgeous.
I love it. I mean, both with the letterpress and the sewing, it is such a creative outlet. Like I feel like I was like, oh, this was already, was there.
It was all inside.
I just didn't have time. And there's so much that I learn about life from this process.
Oh,
yes, it is like slow down.
Yes,
take your time. Don't rush it. I nearly lost a finger back in July.
There was an incident that involved the emergency room.
Yes, and then nearly, I nearly lost a finger.
But hey, some hobbies are, cool, creative, and dangerous.
Fingers finger,
you might lose it.
But I will tell you, you need your left index finger way more than you know.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Where you don't notice how much you use something until you can't use it anymore. And are you left-handed?
No, I'm right-handed.
She's not even left-handed. And she was like,
I need that finger. So my sister, we just laugh because now I have a really pointy pointer finger.
Thanks to the sewing accident. That is so funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so your new hobbies are slow, and they've taught you these beautiful life lessons. You got to keep yourself busy and occupied during the pandemic. So I kind of want to talk about like, how was that in Buenos Aires? Because I was in the U.S. during that time. So I want to know, just like touch on how things were here during like the height of the pandemic versus kind of now. What about like the girls' school and what happened?
Oh my gosh. So March 11th, 2020, the day the world changed for everybody, is actually my husband's birthday.
Oh my goodness.
And my brother and sister-in-law were here. They were supposed to be, they arrived like on March 9th. They were supposed to be here for 10 days, and they were here for almost a month. So Buenos Aires and Argentina went into a pretty strict lockdown. So eventually they were able to leave, but we stayed in lockdown for months. I mean, there was one point in time, Kimberly, where we had not left this apartment in, I want to say 2+ months.
Wow.
Like, not, when I say not left like this apartment, not even on the old dangerous elevator. Like, that was the level of lockdown. So you could go to the doctor, or you could go to the grocery store. Only one person could go. At the time, Michael was the only one like leaving to go to the grocery store. When we finally were able to leave, it was by our document, like our
ID
numbers on certain days of the week, and you could only go so far. So, you know, we were watching our U.S. friends and family who were complaining. And I'm like, what were they complaining about?
Everything. Like, I can't believe you're trying to keep me alive.
You're like, but you're like,
you could do everything you wanted to do.
You're doing all the things, and I'm literally inside my house.
Yeah.
But you know, I realized how much I love this little family we created. We really did make the most of it. And I think we made the decision that, like, if we go down, the girls are going to go down. And so we were like,
we're all going down together.
Yeah. But I think that was like, you like get yourself together and you're like, we're not going to let these lockdowns, these restrictions, we're not going to let it defeat us. And we had a lot of fun. I mean, with the sewing and the baking and the letterpress, and we would have like themed days. Like we had a picnic in the house, and we did Disney Day, and we did tea parties, and we just learned. My daughters started crocheting, and Olivia really got into film and creating short films and dancing. There was a break dancing season.
Oh, wow.
There was all kinds of things, piano lessons. I mean, all kinds of things came out of that, and some things have stuck and some things haven't.
That's good.
But we were like, we're gonna try a lot of things, and we had a lot of fun. We really did.
That's good. An opportunity to like try a lot of things and see what sticks.
Yeah,
that sounds like my pandemic projects, because I was, like I said, I had a garden, I was painting, I'm doing yoga, I started the podcast, I did the website. I was just like, all the things.
All the things
to fill the
never
days.
had time to do. And I had a friend who was like, friend, I am so worried about you. You're just in that house. And I was like,
we're good.
We're having a grand old time.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, I do not want to make light of the pandemic or any of it. It was a challenge for us like it was for everybody else. But we really did try our best to make the most of it. And we have some really great memories.
You have to, like, these situations, I think, has taught all of us just like this kind of forced pause to appreciate the moment. Like you said, slow down, like do a letterpress. That'll really make you slow down.
I know, process. Exactly. Or yes, you can lose a finger. You can lose a finger in letterpress too.
You may lose some limbs, but okay, it's still fun and exciting.
Exactly.
All right. So now that you're like in Buenos Aires, tell us kind of some observations that you've had comparing your life here, even though like a big chunk of that was in the pandemic, and then you're super duper like busy, high pressure, high stress life back in the States.
Oh, wow. There are some real characteristics of the Argentine culture that I look forward to taking home, and I really hope that we can maintain them. the last couple of years economically for the people of Argentina have been so difficult. The peso has just been really down, and it's been a tough time here economically. But the people have been so friendly and nice to us. I mean, our neighbors used to greet us with a kiss every morning until the pandemic. And
You're right.
Like,
Just don't want to do
good
that
morning,
anymore.
buen dia, so they really are very friendly people. We always laugh because anytime you're stressed about anything, or they can detect that you're stressed, they say, tranqui, don't worry about it, no importa. And they really do pride themselves on kind of wellness. You'll see a lot of, although it's a very beefy culture, there is
delicious. When she says beefy, not like beefy guys, but like beef, like
Real
moo cow beef,
Yes.
and it's delicious.
But there's also it is excellent. Especially coming from Texas, like I'm like, this is right up our alley. So we do barbecues at home. They do the asados on la parrilla. They all have these built-in, like, elaborate, what do you call them? Grills in their backyards. For those who live we live in a building, but there's a huge barbecue culture. It's different from
Texas,
ours at home, but
right?
it's a big barbecue culture.
There's no sauces.
Yeah, they don't do the whole sauce thing. They're like, why are you
It would
gonna
be so much
defile
better
this
with
good
sauce.
meat? They're like, don't defile this good meat with, all your sauce. But they also there's a lot of health and wellness, a lot of emphasis on mental health here as well. And so I just love that, they're always encouraging one another, tranqui, and I love that. And then there's just the pace of life, and that again is something that I feel like we've adopted as a family. And we read this book, Michael and I read this book with our church group called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, and it is all about getting hurry out of your life.
It's
so that just happened. It was just something that we read while we were here, but it's also very in line with this culture. So for example, you go to dinner and they're not trying to turn the tables over quickly. They are not going to rush you. Sometimes you have to flag your waiter down. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like that's being rude. And I thought that maybe they were being rude, but they are letting you enjoy your time. So
without hovering.
You don't
get the hover.
You don't get the hover.
You really don't.
And, I love that. When Michael works in the business district, he's now starting to return back to the office, and you can walk through the business district, right? And people are in the parks playing ping pong in the middle of the day.
Oh, I love that.
They take their lunch. They take their vacation. It is not uncommon to sit at a cafe and have merienda, which is like coffee or tea, and a croissant, or media luna, which is a very sweet croissant, and just sit there for hours. I mean, for hours.
It's like tea time, snack time.
Yes.
Sitting on the terrace, enjoying the weather's beautiful right now.
The weather is beautiful. It is beautiful. And so I love that. And I'm like, when I go home, who's going to sit and have coffee with me for 2 hours?
Shall we do the merienda?
Yes, anybody. And everybody's going to be like,
I got to get back to work.
I got 20 minutes for you, if that. So, yeah, I'm going to have to recruit some.
You're going to, I don't know who are you going to, hey, call me.
I'll call you, Kimberly. I'll call you.
I don't know where I'll be, but if we have to do like virtual merienda, I'm there.
Absolutely. I love that. Virtual merienda. That feels like that needs to be a thing.
It should be a thing. So it's like a sip and chat, right? But with like media lunas.
It is. I mean, I'm telling you, come on, Americans, get with the program. We move way too fast at home, and I feel like we could be so much more as a people
overall
if we're just my brother and my sister-in-law, they're not married, they're
the partners of the
my siblings. Yeah, my brother and my other brother's wife.
Okay.
They have I wouldn't say they have similar personalities, but they both have adopted the phrase "the joy of missing out," because neither one of them are afraid of like saying no to things or just like, that sounds great for you, but I'm gonna pass because I just want to be home.
Right.
And I love that about both of them. And so it's just something that we've joked about for years, but now I feel like that's me. Like
JOMO.
Like,
hey, there's FOMO, the fear of missing out, but I'm going to take this JOMO.
It's wonderful. And it's just, it's one of those things. And I love it because my oldest daughter, I see it in her. And I'm like, hold on to that. You don't have to do everything, be a part of everything. You can celebrate with people when they're doing that, and then step away. And so that's one of the things that is not my natural personality, and that was not who I was when I got here, but it's something that I've adapted and that I love and that I hope to take back home.
That's good. I love it. So slowing down, enjoying the journey, that's actually my tagline, which is enjoy the journey, because it is about like that everyday life that you're living, not the destination, because at the end we're just gonna die. I'm sorry if you didn't know, that's the end.
I'll share
Don't race to the finish.
Don't race to the finish.
Enjoy it. Right?
I'm gonna share a short story, and it didn't happen here in Argentina, but it was a result of the move to Argentina. So we moved here in the summer of 2019 in July. My husband moved here in May. So while we were waiting on visas and the whole thing, the girls and I were in the U.S. most of that time with my parents for about 6 weeks. Well, my grandfather, my dad's dad, passed away that summer. He was 95 years old. And we had gone on a trip to the East Coast, and my dad was supposed to pick us up from the airport, and he couldn't because my grandfather had taken a fall, and he was like, I think this might be the end, so get over here in the morning. This was like mid-June. I think he died on like June 19th or 20th. I had just had my last day of work like 2 weeks before, okay? The first week of June, I think, was my last week of work. So we get back from this short trip. My grandfather falls. My dad says, get to the hospital. We go to the hospital. We spent that day with him. I spent that day that he passed away at the hospital with him, 95 years old. It was a sweet time. It was a special time. He was 95. I mean, it was sad, but, we all want to live to 95 and then die in our sleep, right? Like that's kind of the right.
That's a dream.
That's a dream.
That's how I want to go.
Die at 95 and then
you're like and scene. Right. Oh my gosh, I did not want to make you laugh when you talked about your grandmother's passing.
But I really can celebrate because he was 95. Like it was sweet, and so. The whole point of this story is that now listen, I had just stopped working for 2 weeks. And I am not saying everybody needs to quit their jobs, and I know there are many ways to skin a cat.
Yes.
But he passed away, and I remember in the days after, I said, that was the first big event of my life in 15 years that I was fully present for. I had gotten married. I had 2 kids. And I was like, there was nothing hovering over my head. There were no emails. There was no to-do list. There was no need to return that phone call. I was just there. Wow. And I was like, what all have I missed? Like being fully
right, where just a part of you or a part of your attention was present.
Yeah. And it was eye-opening to me because sometimes it's until you experience it without the exhaustion or without the stuff hanging over your head, you don't even know. That's
the thing, because you're so caught up in your stuff that you can't see or you can't imagine taking a step back. And when you do that, it really is like a breath of fresh air. The weight is lifted,
Yeah.
And then once like you're here and you're like, I don't know when I'm going back. I've been, well, before the COVID,
Oh, yes.
I was away for 15 years, and I knew that first year that I didn't want to return because I was like, I've seen the other side. I've tasted the Kool-Aid. I saw the rainbow.
Yes. Yes.
I can't go back. No hay paso atrás.
See, it was just, I don't know. I just did not realize how much of my life, and again, I'm not discounting. I mean, I had a wonderful wedding and a wonderful delivery of kids and all those things, but I was like, there was like this layer over everything in life that I did not realize
Was there.
because I was just so busy. I was just so busy. And I think in the U.S. we wear that busyness as a badge of honor and importance.
You have hit the nail on the head. It's like why Americans are afraid to like take the vacation days, you know? It's like, oh, if I leave, then someone's going to like scoop in and then, you know, but it's not. Like rest is reformative and it's needed.
It is.
Like you need your body to rest. It has to have like that regenerative time to,
We do.
and you're going to be
We
your
need
best
it.
self if you're well rested and you
it-
sleep 8 hours. It's still my dream. I'm trying to work on that.
Oh.
In my dream world, I'm team 8 hours. In the reality, that's not the case.
It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. And I'm not even saying like I don't want to create some fantasy of what life is like. There are still times, like I said, there are times where it stinks. I'm like, oh, I could be, you know. Because look, there are no accolades here.
Right.
You know, there are no accolades with the sewing or the letterpress. There's no, ooh, you're a high-powered attorney, or you're
Best
a
new quilter award.
Exactly. There's none of that. Look, there's not any of that. So, I think, and there are other things about living abroad. You know, sometimes people forget about you, or there's, you know, you miss out on things. I had just this past week, I lost my first friend who our last text was, hey, catch up with you next time you're in the U.S.
Oh, goodness.
And we got a call the other day and just an unexpected death. So there is a lot that you miss out on because you're away. And it's not all, I mean, look, I prided myself on being able to get my day-to-day activities done, go to the grocery store, you know, drive a car, all the things that become exponentially harder, speak to my neighbors, communicate with the people around me. Those things become exponentially harder living outside the country. But there are also great trade-offs. I just want to put that out there because I don't want people to think that it's like some.
It's not always like rainbows and puppies.
Right.
There are, you know, those growing pains. You're relearning how to do things that came so easily to you before.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, Rachel and I we had a nail appointment today, and we were just chatting there, and she mentioned like how hard it was to make friends like as an adult, and it's like, wow, it's a real thing.
It's a thing.
Like, how do you make friends when you're not a part of that kind of ready-made community of like college, or like you said, your law school, your professional women's network, and now you're doing something completely different.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you even do that?
It's you said ready-made, and I didn't realize how many of the friends that we have in life are ready-made from some kind of certain point in time, right? Or community. And it's funny because I feel like, you know, as a mom, I'm always teaching my children how to make friends. Like, and I always say,
be polite.
my mother used to say, to have friends, you have to show yourself friendly.
I love it. Thanks, Mom.
And so I have repeated that to my kids all the time. It sounds like 1950s.
It does.
So friendly. But it is not easy to make friends as an adult. And I didn't realize until, you know, just recently that most of my friends were from, you know, a work community or a church community or a professional, you know, environment or from college or law school or something. And then to make friends in a brand new environment as an adult. I always say, I have this good friend, and I was like, if I didn't know you before 32, there is way too much history. Like, up, right? Like, you're going to take my jokes wrong. You're not going to know the backstory. There's too much explaining.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge of living abroad, is learning to make friends as an adult and in a brand new environment. Our kids go to an international school, so we're meeting people from all over the world. And that was probably more challenging than I thought. And we've made some amazing friends here and have met some outstanding people that we never would have known. But it's hard, and particularly in a pandemic, right?
Yep. Because like you said, you're in your house.
We were just getting to know people. We were like 8 months in and had just started to make some friends, and then all of a sudden you don't see them for a year and a half, and it's like, we can talk by phone or Zoom. Do you like me? Do you not like me?
Yeah.
All the things.
Okay.
So.
That's a lot, I think, to kind of move to a new place and then like just, that's a lot of changes on top of changes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, well, I have loved having you on the podcast. So before I let you go, is there anything that you could give in terms of like advice or consejos to particularly like families? Because moving abroad with children is a lot different than, like, for example, me. I'm just like, I'm going to go here.
Yeah.
So what could you tell people that either maybe haven't been thinking of it until they heard your episode, or they've been thinking about it but are afraid to take the leap? What could you say? Don't be scared.
I say this has been one of the most amazing experiences of our life. I always tell Michael, I'm like, it needs to get better from here. Like, this has been sweet. Like, we got to keep going up. I'm not going back to like, I'm not backtracking. So this has been an absolutely amazing experience. I think, showing yourself some grace, right? Because you're going to feel like a 3-year-old, particularly if you don't know the language or you barely know the language. It's extremely humbling, right? To not know
what's happening around you.
You don't know how to make change. You don't know how to get to the grocery store or talk to your neighbors. It's just like, wah, wah, wah. And so there are times when I have felt like a complete idiot, you know, I'm like, ah. So, just embrace the change. I think our kids respond to our reactions to things and emotional wellness.
That is really important, because you're learning, but you're also giving them that example.
Yes,
right?
Modeling. Yeah,
absolutely. Because kids are always watching.
Oh, yes,
they're always watching.
They're very observant, and they will call you out.
And her girls are not shy.
Yeah, they call me out all the time. Kind of like,
Mom.
No. Come on. So, so you're definitely modeling. So I think like our emotions to the changes of being here and to the pandemic definitely, they responded to those. So it was important for us to be positive and to make the most of those things, because then I think that they did. So I would say embrace change, like embrace, be okay, just be humbled by it. You're gonna be humbled, so you might as well embrace it and not just be embarrassed by everything. And I think, like, there are things in the U.S. that we grow so accustomed to, and they feel very efficient and whatnot. And I'm like, just embrace the differences. Try something new. We don't always have it figured out in the U.S. There's so much that we don't. So instead of complaining about the differences, just like lean into them. I think that's been
I like that.
Very
lean into
helpful.
the differences.
Lean into the differences.
Lean into it. I love that.
There's so much, but those are probably the big things.
All right, that is great advice. And on that note, I will say thank you so much for listening, and thank you for, number one, inviting me, having me in your house, and being a fabulous guest on the Kimmytravels podcast.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here. It has been a pleasure.
I'm her first post-COVID house guest, so that's also an honor.
Yes, you've got to sign the guest book.
Upon me.
You cannot leave without signing the guest book.
Don't worry.
It's got like a bunch of empty pages. It has not been signed.
I'm going to fill in all the pages.
2020.
All right. And for everybody else, thank you so much for listening. And remember, enjoy the journey.
Ciao. Ciao, ciao for now.